Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 22nd, 2010. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. But this week, Chris Colby and I kick off not one, but two collaborative experiments between Basic Brewing Radio, Brew Your Own magazine, and, of course, you. We'll look at whether Irish moss really does make a difference in your beers, and what happens to beers stored at varying temperatures over time. Well, if you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And you can find our show at Basic Brewing or facebook.com/basicbrewing. Every other show, I messed that up. I don't know. If you become a fan of the show, we'll let you know when new episodes are posted. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us and click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we appreciate your support greatly. You can also click on our associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. And we have a big announcement this week. We now have an iPhone app. That's right. If you search for Basic Brewing on the iTunes store, you can find not only our podcasts, but our little application. It's available on iTunes. It's only a couple of bucks, and has a bunch of nifty features. You can access all our audio and video episodes in one place. You can stream episodes from anywhere and download them to your device for offline enjoyment. You can get bonus content connected to some of the episodes. There's not much out there yet, but I'll be putting bonus content out there as we get it, and hopefully going back and finding some stuff for the older episodes too. For instance, I'm gonna put a little audio clip, more of a test than anything else. Just a little audio clip out there connected to this episode. So look for that just for fun. And we can put PDF files there too. And it's just a lot of fun. There are also easy links to get in touch with us on the app. And you can favorite your favorite episodes and so on and so forth. Really cool. It's only a couple of bucks, $1.99. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you think, and it should get better over time as I learn how to use it and learn how to connect more information to it. So check it out, our Basic Brewing iPhone app. Here's a reminder for you. The American Homebrewers Association Big Brew is coming up May 1st. It's in a couple of weeks. There are going to be events happening in many places to celebrate home brewing. It's a great opportunity to take part in home brewing with your friends, to initiate your friends who aren't into the hobby yet, since there's going to be a lot of brewers and clubs, brewing events, all kinds of things going on. Check out homebrewersassociation.org for lots more information on that, the Big Brew Day. Also, remember the National Homebrewers Conference is coming up in June. The third week in June. Steve and I will be traveling to Minneapolis, so we hope you will too. And I'll be moderating one of the sessions there. And Steve and I will be recording an episode of this show as well. During that episode, we'll be featuring the Prairie Homebrewing Companions from Fargo. They're a homebrewing club, and they're going to share some great beer and some of their secrets on how to brew those beers, and some background on their club and the education programs that they're running. They're doing some really interesting stuff, so should be fun to talk to them. Should be fun to maybe see what it's like to put one of these shows together live, sort of. You'll get to see all the stuff that, we cut out, all my stupid questions. You'll get to see that I cut out. And we hope that you'll be there. And then we may give some free goodies away at our little session. It'll be like the last session of the thing before dinner. So I'm looking forward to it. Now, I've been getting emails recently from brewers who are itching to take part in the next BYO-BBR collaborative experiment. People love them. They have fun. So let's talk to Chris Colby to see what's on tap for the next two. Well, Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
James, thanks for having me on.
This is now we're going to be talking about our fourth collaborative experiment?
Sure, let's call it our fourth and fifth.
Fourth and fifth. So we first started out with what did we do first? We did the aging experiment, then we did the pitching experiment, then we did the partial boil experiment. Mm-hmm. So now, for number 4, we're going to tackle one of the suggestions that the tweeters gave us when I originally tweeted out the question there, and that is, does Irish moss really work? So let's start out by and we used the Google to find the Latin name for it, and I guess according to a couple of websites, it's Chondrus crispus, which was a wonderful breakfast cereal in the 70s, I think. But what is Irish moss? What are we talking about? How do we use it?
Irish moss is a seaweed-like thing, and it's sort of chopped up, and you add it during the boil, and with the idea that one of the ingredients, or not ingredients, one of the components of it, called carrageenan, is negatively charged at the pH of boiling wort, and it'll float around, in the boil, and it'll attract positively charged molecules, including proteins, and probably anything else that's positively charged. But for our purposes, it's protein, which can contribute to haze. And once the carrageenan has attracted a bunch of different proteins, because it's a huge, big molecule. Simply the weight of it all tends to make it settle out in the kettle. So when you cool the beer and rack it to the fermenter, the Irish moss is sitting in the trube at the bottom of your kettle. You rack the clear beer, off the top of it, and it's sitting at the bottom of the kettle, holding on to those proteins that you don't necessarily want in your wort and your final beer, because they could lead to haze.
Now there's also another product called Whirlflock, which is like a brand name of these tablets, and according to the Northern Brewer website that I'm looking at now, it is a blend of Irish moss and purified carrageenan that help precipitate haze-causing proteins and beta-glucans. So there's sort of a Irish moss on steroids out there as well.
Right, and a lot of people use that. It's fairly popular.
Now, I haven't used Irish moss or any clarifier in several batches, and it started because I forgot. Because you put it in the last 15 minutes of the boil, and with everything that goes on around the brew pot, I've forgotten, and I haven't noticed a huge difference. Of course, I haven't done any side-by-side testing, but it hasn't been like, oh my God, my beer is just so cloudy, I can't stand it. So I haven't used it recently, which is another reason why that got me kind of wondering about this. I mean, do you use Irish moss every time you brew?
I do, simply because I want my beers to be clear, and like you said, not having done a side by side, I don't know for certain that it really is doing anything. But that's what our experiment should answer, mm-hmm. And it should be fairly interesting, because you can imagine at least a couple different subtleties to it. Assuming that it does work, which you'd sort of hope, given that people write about it, that it does work, and even come up with a mechanism involving molecules and charges and all that good stuff. But assuming it does work, it might work better in some situations than others. If you had a beer that was, the wort was relatively low in protein levels, it might not do much because, the protein level might already be below the threshold where, it's going to cause significant haze. Likewise, if you have a beer with, you know, say you've added a decent portion of wheat to it or oats or something that's got, a decent amount of protein, then it might have a somewhat big effect. And with our collaborative experiment, given that we're going to let people, the brewers, brew whatever kind of beer they want, hopefully we'll get Irish moss used in a variety of different kinds of beer and see if that causes a difference. I do know that, for one thing, dark beers, for some reason, seem to clear a lot better on their own. So it'll hopefully at least a couple people will do a dark beer and try Irish moss versus not and check the clarity there. So, I think this is an interesting experiment. It's one that should be very doable for people. It's gonna involve brewing 2 batches of beer, same kind of beer, with the only difference being the Irish moss content or Whirlflock.
Now, could it be, are there situations where using a clarifier like this might cause some negative effects on the beer?
Well, that's a good question too. If you're dragging, the idea is that it's dragging proteins and other positively charged molecules out of the beer. You could at least hypothesize that some of those would have some sort of flavor active component that maybe the beer would lack in some sort of flavor. Maybe the body of the beer would change. Maybe the bitterness or some element of the hop character would change. So that's another very good question. It's at least hypothetically possible that Irish moss would work to clarify the beer, but it would also, have a negative impact on the total amount of flavor or aroma.
Yeah, if you're working to get a bunch of bitterness in the beer, for example, and hops cause cloudiness or haze anyway, if you put a bunch in there, you might find yourself in a situation where you don't want to use Irish moss because it might affect the flavor characteristics of that hoppy beer. I don't know.
Yeah, it would. And right now, I'm really wishing I remembered what the charge on various hop components are in at beer pH. I'd have to look that up. Acids obviously are going to be. They're going to have the anion part and the cation part, the acidic part. So yeah, you wouldn't expect it to be dragging down the alpha acid part necessarily.
So
yeah, interesting.
So first of all, what you got to do is pick the style of beer that you want to brew, and we're going to leave that up to everybody out there. Are we even going to supply a recipe this time, do you think?
I don't think we need to. I mean, I think someone, given that you're going to brew 2 batches of beer, just pick something that you've liked that's worked well before, and that you're going to enjoy drinking 2 batches of, and go for it.
I think I'm going to use the same recipe from the previous experiment, that hoppy double IPA that you came up with. That was a tasty one. And
that should give us good results too with regards to the with the hop question.
Right.
There's bitterness and hop flavor in that aplenty.
Now you can either brew 2 batches or you can brew multiple batches, because we've got a couple of variables just in the product itself. If you want to do Irish moss versus no Irish moss versus Whirlflock, that would be a good 3-batch experiment.
Yeah.
Or if you want to, say, do no Irish moss versus the recommended amount of Irish moss versus either way more or way less Irish moss, it would be another variable as well.
Right. The basic experiment we're looking for is someone to either brew, 2 batches, 1 no Irish moss and 1 at the recommended level, or 1 with no Whirlflock and 1 at the recommended level. But there's all kinds of experiments that you can do, in this collaborative experiment that would work too. You could do Irish moss versus Whirlflock would be one. You could do two different levels of Irish moss, say the recommended amount and maybe double that, or the recommended amount and half, and the same thing with Whirlflock. Because these are all, there's slightly different questions you're being asked with the experiment, but we should be able to get good data from all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, if someone's like really excited to brew, three or more batches, then certainly you could do, no Irish moss, the recommended amount, and either more or less, or do a whole series, or no Irish moss or Whirlflock, and then one with Irish moss and one with Whirlflock. There's a million different combinations that you can do. And the basic one we're looking for, the one we're really focusing on is the recommended amount of the clarifier versus not adding it.
Mm-hmm.
But the secondary questions they're all good. It's all good.
It's all good. Now,
you get to drink the beer in the end. It's all good.
Now, one thing that we talked about before we started recording was that there may be a snag if you're an extract brewer who does partial boils and then tops off with water in the fermenter. Because in the previous episode or the previous experiment, I had the situation where I transferred different amounts of concentrated wort from the kettle with the varying batches and topped off with the same with water to make each of the volumes in the fermenters equal, but wound up with different beers slightly because of different starting gravities. So that's a tricky situation, and how should we advise people to work around that?
Right. Well, if you're doing like an all grain version or extract where you're doing a full wort boil, you don't have to worry about this. But in the case where you're diluting the beer in the fermenter, you might expect that with the clarifying agent you have a little bit more trub, therefore you yield a little bit less volume in the fermenter when you be a little bit more dilute when you top up. So what you'd want to do is do the one where you expect to have more trub first. Measure carefully how much wort you get from that, before topping up. And then in the second one, make sure that you only put that much amount of wort in the fermenter of the concentrated wort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just so that you're starting with the same amount of concentrated wort, adding the same amount of dilution water, so that you don't end up. The variable here is supposed to be the presence or absence of the clarifying agent, and without correcting for that, there's a secondary variable would be introduced, and that would be that one of the beers would be a little bit more dilute than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that would certainly make it a little bit more clear, simply because whatever haze causing agents in there would be just diluted that a little bit more.
Of course, what you could do is just do a smaller volume of beer. Like, for instance, if you're used to only boiling, say, 3 gallons of water in your brew pot and then topping off to 5, maybe you just have a 3-gallon batch.
Sure, that would work well.
And since you're making twice as much beer anyway because you're making 2 batches, it might make sense anyway to just avoid the problem with the topping off and the diluted wort, and just do a partial batch of beer or a smaller batch of beer.
Sure.
Which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to wind up with say 2.5 gallons of beer and just not top off. So, at what points should we be observing the beer? I mean, obviously, I would think that after chilling, after you chill the beer and you're transferring to the fermenter, if you notice that there is, say, more trub in the bottom of the Irish moss wort, that may be an indication that it's working because there's more stuff settled down to the bottom of the kettle, right?
Yeah, in the experiment, like our basic, the basic data we want to collect is when the beer is brewed and they're sitting down, they're carbonated, chilled side by side, what's the difference there? But along the way, there are several different interesting observations that we can make. Like you say, the amount of trub, right after you boil. That's a very good observation. If you end up making both of them and it seems like the trub's about at the same level, that's a good observation. But if you look and you see, oh, the Irish Moss batch had twice as much trub, that's a good observation. Likewise, wort clarity, in the fermenter, that's a good, because if to a certain extent, it's going to be hard to judge because the wort's very quickly going to have yeast and stuff in it. But if the chilled wort looks different in the two batches, that's a good observation. And we'll have next week posted on James's site. We'll have the experimental protocol for this, and we'll have a little checklist like we had before of different things to take a look at. Mm-hmm. Because we'll do the obvious ones, check for clarity, flavor differences, but we'll also just do some just obvious stuff because we can measure it, like OG and FG and things like that. And we'll have a little sheet giving a protocol for what to do in the experiments and what data to collect.
And what you could when you're taking a gravity reading at the bottling time, if you look at your hydrometer sample there, that's another point to look and check the clarity. You won't necessarily be able to check them side by side.
Sure.
But also, if you can look through the bottles, I mean, this may be an opportunity where you may want to put a couple of these in clear or in colorless. They're all clear, but
you really want to monitor your beer, huh?
Yeah, I mean, really, if you,
this is like going back to the first couple batches that everyone brewed, checking every day to see how it's changed the slightest amount.
Well, but that way you can look at your beer before you put it in the fridge and see if there is a difference. If both beers are clear or unhazy before you put them in the fridge, and then one has more chill haze than the other, then that would be a variable that you could write down, that you could take a look at, and you could see if you bottled in a Corona bottle or something like that.
Yeah.
Just keep it out of the sunlight. Keep them in a dark place, out of the fluorescent lights, so you don't skunk your beer. So anyway, yeah, take plenty of notes all the way through the process, and we'll just see if Irish Moss or Whirl Flock actually does make a difference. Now, we have another, or is there anything else that you want to add before we move on to the second one?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. We hope, as in the previous experiments, we hope that a lot of people will join us. This is 2 batches of beer, so it's a, not inconsequential amount of work, but it's not a ton either. And I think it's a good question. Glad for the Twitter reader,
tweeter,
Twitterer, who submitted the question. And I think this can be potentially a good one.
Now, the second experiment that we're going to talk about today is our 5th experiment in the series, and this is one that is theoretically easier to conduct. And it is a long-term one. So it's something that you want to get started on, but it is something that we're not going to think about much for a while. And that is, how does varying temperature conditions affect cellaring beers or aging beers, right?
Yep.
So what we're asking people to do is to take some bottles of homebrew, and since it's summertime up here in the northern hemisphere, coming on summertime, what we're asking you to do is put some of the bottles in your attic or where it's nice and hot, could be your garage, and then some in the fridge where it's nice and cool, I hope, and then some at room temperature, and then we'll check the results of how the beers age over some time. So how do we conduct this experiment? What are your ideas on that?
Okay, I have two different ways this experiment could work, and this one's pretty nice because it's really easily doable. All you need is one batch of beer, and in fact, if you're doing the other experiment, you can just take some of the bottles from that experiment and use them for this. And I think there's basically two different variants you could do. One would be a 9-bottle experiment, and one will be an 11-bottle experiment. And I'll explain the 9-bottle one, and then the 11 one's just a twist on that. Basically, brew a batch of beer. When you end up with, once the bottles are all conditioned, the beer's ready to go. Take 3 bottles, put them in the fridge. 3 bottles, put them, somewhere warm in your attic or in a tool shed out back or something, non-air conditioned. And then put 3 at room temperature. It's going to be dark inside the refrigerator, so keep the others dark, and try to keep any other variables the same. Like, don't put one somewhere where that's shaking constantly or something like that. Try to keep temperature, making that the variable. And then what we do was we want to see both. We're reasonably sure that the experience of people over at brewers over the years that temperature does affect aging, and this experiment is more to figure out the degree to which it does. And one thing we would do then is taste the different beers at 3 separate times. The first would be in an incredibly short term, like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Does just 2 weeks of storing a beer at room temperature, make that go bad, or does the hot one, or can a short amount of time, does that really not make a difference? Our second tasting would be at 3 months, and at this point we would collect the results from everybody, with the idea that the 6 or the next stage bottles were still not done, but we'd do a mini wrap up of the experiment that time, and then after 6 months taste the beer again, and so you'd have basically a short term, a medium term, and a somewhat longer term storage at 3 different temperatures, mm-hmm. 9 bottles. And, that should, given with, again, you can brew whatever style of beer you want for this, we should get some good results. Some interesting things to look at amongst the results we get might be, say, lighter, less strong beers versus, big heavy ones. Mm-hmm. Hopefully maybe we'll get some data of light colored beers versus dark colored beers. There's a lot of potential results we could get out of this. Aside from the straight one of how fast does beer go bad at these various temperatures. And the last thing we want to do, there's also if you want to do 11 bottles, do an 11 bottle variant. Just to take 2 extra bottles, start them off in the fridge, but then either every week or every 2 weeks or at some period, cycle those between the fridge and the warmest spot so that it gets cold, stays cold for a while, gets warm, stays warm for a while. The reason behind that is that you frequently read that warm temperatures are bad for storing beer, but cyclical temperature changes where it goes back and forth from being warm and cold are the worst. And so we'd try those bottles, and we probably wouldn't do the 2 week I guess we could do it. We could make it a 12. Yeah, we should do it 12 bottles. Because you'd have to do it a week in the fridge and a week at hot.
Mm-hmm. So what people do is they put the bottles in the various places. And they should probably sit at room temperature for a couple weeks just to get a basic bottle conditioning, right?
Yeah, you'd want to start with conditioned beer that's ready to go at the beginning of the experiment. So
all the beers.
So don't prime the beer and throw it right in the fridge.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Yeah. Start with beer that either if you bottled it from a keg, it's ready to go, or if you're bottle conditioning, let it bottle condition. Try a bottle in that batch to see that everything's conditioned and ready to go, and then start the experiment.
Right.
Put 3 in the fridge, 3 in the hot location, and 3 in the room temperature location, or 4 in each of those locations if you're doing the additional part of the experiment with the cyclical temperatures.
Mm-hmm. And then you test them after a couple of weeks, take some notes, then leave them in their respective places until the end of the summer, and then we'll give you some advance warning on the podcast when we want you to go ahead and taste your beers, and we'll give you some time to do that and send us your results. And then we can keep one in those respective places, assuming that the hot place stays hot.
Yeah.
and come back to it and say, like you said, 6 months or so, and do a follow-up to see
just visit.
To see if
exactly.
Yeah. So it sounds really easy. Now, one thing that you may want to do in the hot place is to put those beers in, say, a container that if they exploded,
hopefully that won't happen.
But that you might want to put them in a trash bag or something just in case, because the only time I've ever had bottle bombs, knock wood, was when I had bottles in a very hot little laundry room where in the middle of the summer with the dryer going, it got real hot in there, and I had some bottle bombs. So I attribute at least some of that to heat. And then I may be making a mistake on that, but at least putting your bottles in a garbage sack or garbage bag to catch that if it happens, it's a good insurance policy if nothing else.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea. And also, just like on the Irish Moss or World Flock experiment, we'll have the experimental protocol put up for this in about a week. And one little sort of thing to keep in mind is when you come to sample the beers, you're going to have to cool them down all to the same temperature.
Yeah.
So you'll have to take one from your room temperature spot and one from the warm spot and let them cool down. And you're probably going to want to do that at least over one night, because you don't want to try to, just cool it in a couple hours and end up, sampling beers at different temperatures and trying to make a determination that way. So give it at least, I would say at least 12 hours. So the beer gets down to the temperature, sits there for a little while. And anyway, I think this experiment should be very interesting.
And label your beers well.
Especially the ones in the fridge. Put a do not.
Yeah.
If you have thirsty roommates.
I could just see myself, putting like a 1, a 2, and a 3 on the caps, and then let's see, were the ones upstairs or were the 3? Oh man, So put a sticker on there, and put the details of do not drink, poison, and then where it was stored, so that you don't get confused. So I think that those are both good experiments. And the second one, especially, everybody can participate.
That one should be. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of people, and that'll be good because there's, like we said, with different strengths of beer, or maybe even with different colors of beer, with different hoppinesses of beer. Maybe that's a good one. I'd like to see the results on a very hoppy beer, compared to more like a cream ale or a golden ale or something. Hopefully we'll get a lot of people to participate, and we'll be able to, see some of the differences. Because, we fully suspect that the basic idea of storing a beer like warm or cyclically warm and cold isn't going to be good. But, the degree to which it's not good and how that difference amongst a bunch of different styles, I think, is going to be new information.
Yeah. Good. Very good. So, anything else for the cause?
Oh, I don't think so. What are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm just wrapping up.
Oh, okay.
Just
sounds good.
Making sure there's nothing I forgot. Just check basicbrewingradio.com. or byo.com and go to Chris's blog and find more details when it's posted.
Right. We should have that up at the start of next week.
Cool.
We'll claim that anyway.
Hey, there's good timing.
That's good timing.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Well, thanks again to Chris. Be on the lookout for more details on basicbrewingradio.com. I'll put a link at the top of the page when Chris gets the details out on his blog, or you can go straight to Chris's blog on byo.com. One thing that I did forget to mention is that we are setting a deadline of June 1st for the Irish moss experiment. So it gives you about 6 weeks. That's usually what we're doing for most of these. So June 1st, we're looking as a deadline to get your data into us. And my plan is to gather the data and record the episode with Chris and the guys before the conference in Minneapolis so we can get that taken care of before we go up to the Homebrew Conference. So please brew up a couple of batches and share your results. I'm just looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to what you choose to brew and what, if any, Irish moss does for your beers. Also, on the other one, get those beers into the attic, fridge, and whatever you're going to use for your room temperature space to start the next experiment. We'll get together at the end of summer to talk about how that turned out. But so it'll be a while before we actually talk about it, but we want to get those beers aging in those different temperature spaces so that we can quantify what happens over time. That's it, I guess. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. We've still got a handful of Brewers Logbooks, and we've got our Reinheitsgebot is a 4-letter word shirt on our shop as well as our other shirts. We even got hats. Check out our homebrewing DVDs, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. We've got combo deals on our site to save you a couple of bucks. And you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are grilled cheese, 50 recipes to make you melt, and Lego architecture, falling water. That would be cool. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we appreciate your support. And don't forget that you can also join the American Homebrewers Association through the link on our site and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine as well. That's all until next week. Don't forget to check out the iPhone app. Until next week, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson down in Austin, Texas. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.